Welcome to your daily dose of Hebrew. We're traveling through Genesis and we're at Genesis 15. We're in the middle of a passage about the Abrahamic covenant. We start with Vayomer Eliv, he said to him. And then we have Kacha li egla mishuleshet. So let's look at Kacha. At the end, we've got a kamete, and that can be a lot of different things, right? But it's not a kamete with a mapik. So let's scratch 3fs pronominal suffix off the list. We see kof and a chet. And no matter what else is going on when we see kof and chet, we should be thinking lakak. Why would we lose R1? Well, we could lose the lamed if we were making an infinitive construct, but then we would get a tav on the end. We can also lose R1 if we have an imperfect, because this particular lamed thinks it's a first noon. It would jump into the next letter as a dagesh forte. But then we would also have an imperfect prefix, which we don't have. But when we take an imperfect and we get rid of the prefix, we make an imperative. And so that kamete on the end is a parakadjike that we sometimes see on 2ms imperative forms. And people think that this is either when there's some sort of immediate benefit back to the speaker, or others might say it's just a polite way to ask instead of using na. But in either case, it's an imperative form. The Lord is making a request of Abram. And so he says, get me a heifer 3 years old. Put translation up a little too early, but let's look at that verb there, meshuleshet. And what do we have at the end of that? Yeah, we've got a tav, and that's telling us feminine. And that makes sense because eglah is a feminine noun. At the beginning, we've got mem, and what's going on with the syllable that R1 is in? All right, so the syllable includes several pieces. It's the shava under the prefixed mem, it's the kibbutz under R1, and the dagesh forte in R2. That's what closes that syllable. Vocal shava kibbutz dagesh is, right, that's the pual stem, and then we look at the root, we see shin, lamed, and shin. Maybe that reminds us of our days counting, echad, shnayim, shalosh. It's not shalosh, but it's the same root. Shalosh is 3. So a D stem, so factative or denominative when we come from nouns, and pual, passive. So a heifer that has been made to be 3, which is bad English. So get me a 3-year-old heifer, the A's meshuleshet, and a 3-year-old goat, va'ayel meshulash. And so now we have a masculine noun, so it's not meshuleshet. And a 3-year-old ram, v'tor v'gozal, so, and a dove and a young pigeon. And then Abram responds, Vayechak lo et kol ela. So the direct object is marked by et. All of these things, referring to the previous list. Vayekak, again from lakak, but now we see the lamed as the dagesh forte in the kof, and it's a kal preterite 3ms. So he got him all of these things. Vayivater otam betavek. So vayivater, at the end is nothing. At the beginning is vav patak dagesh. Whoops, not actually dagesh. Is it still preterite? Yep, how come there's no dagesh? Because the yod is over a vocal shava, and so characteristic of this particular stem, we never get dagesh in the third-person forms, 3ms or 3mp. And what is the stem? We have to look at the syllable of the first radical, and the distinctive thing, or the ID badge for this stem, is vocal shava patak dagesh. It's a PL. So we have a PL of batar, which is probably not a root that we recognize because this is a very rare word. He batard them batavek, in the middle. So we're getting animals out, and so we're cutting them in the middle. So he cut them in the middle, or he cut them in two, might be smooth English. Vayitain ish vitro likrat re'ehu. So vayitain we probably recognize pretty easily from Natan, 3ms preterite. He gave them. Well, gave's not going to be good English here. Let's take a look at what we have. We have ish bitro. Now we should recognize the root, as we just had the root back here as the vav, beit tav resh. Now we have the noun. So if we cut them in the middle or cut them in two before, this bit row with the 3ms suffix on the end is referring to each half or each part. And then, of course, ish doesn't always mean man. It can mean each. So each its part he gave. Set is going to be better English, right? He set likrat. So this is the second kara, not the call-out kara, but the to meet kara. And here we're just talking about positions of things, not greeting. The two halves of these animals are not having I was going to say a handshake, but a hoof shake or anything like that. So it's just not meeting, but being across from. Re'ehu. So who at the end comes from the pronoun who, so that's a 3ms pronoun. And we would probably have glossed this as neighbor, companion, something like that. We see this in Jonah 2 as a way to refer to the different sailors, each his companion. They're addressing each other. Each laying, he sets each one opposite its counterpart is what actually happens. And then we think about different ways to say that in English. And then we've got a parenthetical note, right? So this is not a preterite. It's a noun first thing. And then we've got a perfect verb in there. So ve'et hatzipor lo vatar. There's a text critical note on hatzipor. And so if we look at what that note says, it says sik el mult mus ed, and then it shows us a hey, a tzadi with the dagesh, and then the little slash that means everything else the same afterward. So sik el means thus the Leningrad Codex. This is what we have in the Leningrad Codex. However, there are many manuscripts and editions as collected by Kennicott, Darasi, and Ginsburg that have instead this reading where the only difference is the dagesh and the tzadi. And so then we look at it and say, what's the normal form of the article? Well, it's hey patak dagesh. So the scribes or scribe working on this manuscript failed to put in the dagesh of the article for Chatzipor, and so we will read it as if it is there. Then we have lo vatar. Now this is the third time we've had this root. We had the noun, and the noun was, a half or a part of something. We had the PL form of the verb. What's the stem here with vatar? Okay, this is cal, and how do we know? It's because of the comates under R1. Why do we have the cal here and we had the PL back there? This is not an intensive thing, right? Can't say PL intensive in my classroom. That old notion, get rid of that. So the PL is typically plurative. Sometimes we would say resultative, but typically plurative when we have a cal verb that is dynamic or that's fientive. So we've got that PL form back there at 10b because there is a lot of cutting involved. There's 3 different animals being cut, and he doesn't have a lightsaber. It's not, like single stroke and he's done cutting these animals in half. So it's the plurality of the activity. Here he's talking in 10d about the birds. The birds he did not cut, and so he doesn't need to refer to a PL. The birds are small. He's probably just wringing their necks or maybe even popping their heads off. But he didn't cut them, and it doesn't have that plurative notion, even though there's 2 of them. And so he's using the cal, but in English the meaning's basically the same. And then we have Vayered Ha'ayet al Ha-Pragarim. So ayet is a reference to birds of prey. Vayered, that comes from Yerad, but the yod that you see is not the first radical. What's going on? The yod that you see that has the dagesh of the preterite in it is the prefix, and the yod that is the first radical has become part of that seire underneath the prefix, because that was yod closing a syllable, and when yod is closing a syllable, it turns into a vowel or becomes part of the previous vowel and maybe affects the nature of that vowel a little bit as it does. So we have birds of prey came down all onto, and then this is a root that we don't know, but try and make something up that you think fits the context. Because obviously they're coming down onto the dead animals, and the bodies of dead animals we would call carcasses, and that will work just fine here. Then birds of prey descended on the carcasses. Vayashev otam Avram. And then Abram does something to them. And we look at Vayashev. Probably our instincts are to think of Yashav and to think of Shuv, because often we're trying to figure out which of those two it is. And this is throwing an extra curveball at us. What's the key in here that it's not Shuv and it's not Yashav? Right, in that shin, we've got a dagesh forte. Where does that come from? Now, maybe you're thinking it comes from the PL, but how do we know that that is not a PL dagesh forte? Because you're thinking patak dagesh. The patak of the PL goes under the first radical. Where is it here? It's under the prefix, not under the first radical. When the prefix is over an A-class vowel, we're thinking hifil stem. And in that stem, the ID badge, the distinctive thing is that the first radical is closing the syllable. It's sitting over silent shavah. And the prefix has patak, pretonic, closed short, and it's A-class. Well, if that's the normal thing, what could it affect to turn into a dagesh forte? Well, pretty much the only thing in Hebrew that turns into a dagesh forte is either a second copy of the same letter, as if we would have had shin shin bet, or noon sitting over top of silent shavah. And since we don't have verbs where the first two radicals are the same, right? Geminates have the second and third radicals the same. This indeed is from the root nashav. So neither yashav nor shuv. And what do you think it means from context? A bunch of birds of prey are coming down and landing on the carcasses of the animals. Abram is going to go do something to them. He's going to shoo them away. It's a pretty rare verb. It's considered to mean in the cow something like blow, and then in the hifil, pretty much based on this passage, to frighten them away, cause them to do flapping of wings or something. And so in English, a good way to handle is just to say that Abram shooed them away. So this section of the passage continues to work on giving assurances to Abram. In the previous section, he gave the covenant formula. I'm the Lord who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldees in order to give you this land. And then this ritual is part of a covenant ritual we can see elsewhere in Genesis where there are animals involved in the making of covenants between people. Same thing here. This is something that would be recognized in the ancient Near East. And Abram is getting ready for how this is going to unfold. But to see that, we're going to have to come back for the next paragraphs.